Now, I'd like to transition, if I may, towards something very near and dear to my heart, which is the significance of Virtua Fighter in the Shenmue series.
Sure.
So when I was a kid, I asked my dad if he would buy me a PlayStation, a Sony PlayStation. And he went, yeah, okay. And then he went out and he was like, I'm not going to buy him one of those. It's way too expensive. But he went to a garage sale where he found a used Sega Saturn, which probably should have been more expensive at the time, I think, because it was in the mid-90s. But he got it for way cheap. He just got it off of some guy for like $20 or something. So he gives me this Sega Saturn and he goes, here's your PlayStation. And I'm like, what in the heck? Okay. Oh, Sega. Oh, yeah, I like Sonic. Okay, sure. And at first when I was playing it, I thought, why aren't these graphics very good? They look worse than the N64. They look worse than the PlayStation, right? But then I put in Virtua Fighter 2, and my mind just went, it looked so amazing. And ever since then, I've been a super diehard Virtua Fighter fan. And it really has added to my enjoyment of Shenmue to be a Virtua Fighter fan, because as you know, Shenmue started off as the Virtua Fighter RPG, The Legend of Akira.
Yep.
Sure.
You want to elaborate on that story for anybody who's unfamiliar?
Sure. So I actually made a video about this. It's called Shenmue the Virtua Fighter RPG. And basically, Yu Suzuki is a lot like Sega's Shigeru Miyamoto. He had a lot of arcade hits such as Hang On, Afterburner,
Outrun,
Space Harrier.
Yeah. Dude, yeah, he was Sega's
Power Drift.
Shigeru Miyamoto. The dude could do no wrong.
Absolutely not. And then they said, hey, here's Street Fighter 2. Can you make a fighting game to beat Street Fighter 2? And he went, okay, Virtua Fighter. Bam, it took over arcades like crazy. Mm-hmm. Well, then they had, the Sega Saturn was really worried about the Sony PlayStation, and they had these RPGs coming out, and then they found out, oh no, Final Fantasy VII. We've got to have an RPG that can beat Final Fantasy VII. Well, what they had in the works to have a really good AAA RPG was Panzer Dragoon Saga, and also Virtua Fighter RPG. And they got pretty far into it, but they eventually shifted it from Virtua Fighter RPG to Project Berkeley to be on the Sega Dreamcast, and eventually it took on its own identity and became Shenmue later. And so protagonist Ryo Hazuki ceased to be Akira Yuki from Virtua Fighter, although many of his characteristics are similar.
Yeah.
So
hit the nail on the head.
Anything you want to add to that?
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, great. So my argument is that a love of the Virtua Fighter series and appreciation of it is actually beneficial to the enjoyment of Shenmue. It deepens it. And I remember I was watching one of your videos once a while ago, Adam, and you were talking about how, hey, I'm not really into Virtua Fighter. It's not my thing. I respect it. I appreciate that it has significance to Shenmue's creation, and I love that about Shenmue, but I'm more of a Dead or Alive guy.
That would be a correct assessment, yes.
Yeah. So as a Dead or Alive guy, are you aware of Virtua Fighter's significance to Dead or Alive?
I know that at least some of the characters appeared in Dead or Alive 5, like Akira was in there, Sarah was in there. Was Jackie in there?
Jackie was, yes, that's correct.
That was about it. I'm sure the two paralleled each other throughout the mid-90s and onward, but beyond that, no.
Well, sure. Yeah, because, the guy who created Dead or Alive, Tomonobu Itagaki, he saw Virtua Fighter, and he just went, oh, this is it. He borrowed, in Virtua Fighter, you've got guard, punch, kick. In Dead or Alive, you have the same thing. Whereas as opposed to Tekken, where you have left punch, left kick, right? Like
sure.
It's a little bit different. As far as the whole rock, paper, scissors, punch, kick, guard, and then countering, Dead or Alive more closely resembles Virtua Fighter. It's almost, in a way, it's almost like a spiritual spin or takeoff or a successor to Virtua Fighter in some ways, which is why it paid homage to the Virtua Fighters in Dead or Alive 5 Last Round. And it was kind of funny because Itagaki said, Virtua Fighter is like a fancy restaurant with classical music. And Dead or Alive is like one of those sushi bars where the girls are in bikinis. Like, still quality food, but one's got a classy atmosphere and one's just a lot more fun. is kind of a deal.
I get what you're saying.
If you can get into Dead or Alive, the fundamentals of Dead or Alive are very, very similar to Virtua Fighter. So I'm trying to sell you on this.
I get
I'm
what
trying
you're
to give
doing,
you the hard sell here. Yeah, man. And then you can see how Virtua Fighter's fingerprints are all over Shenmue. You've got the capsule toys, the posters, conspicuously plastered everywhere of Virtua Fighter. Have you noticed, maybe you didn't notice this, but are you aware of how many of Ryo Hazuki's moves and his opponent's moves are ripped straight from the Virtua Fighter games?
Yeah, they used the Virtua Fighter engine. I mean, they did visuals too. Like Ryo is based on Akira, so he has like the same cut on his face. Landi, I believe, was based on one of those characters who has like a green jacket in, I forget his name. I'm sure you remember.
Lao Chan
in Virtua Fighter too. Yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Like the characters are largely based on that, and then they just kind of evolved them into their own IP characters. So, like I said, I respect what it did. It launched Shenmue and gave it like a grounding, a foundation. The actual gameplay of Virtua Fighter, I would have to really kind of revisit the series to possibly appreciate it, because every time I ever played it, it was just a little too, I don't know, I don't want to say slow, because that's not really a fair way of putting it.
Some people say slow or stiff. You can't button mash. It's not button masher friendly.
Yeah.
It has a steep learning curve. But like Shenmue, you get out of it what you put into it. And I think you would really find a lot of enjoyment in getting into some of... I actually make Virtua Fighter lore videos, and if you get into some of the lore, however vague it is, in Virtua Fighter, and you learn about the martial arts styles of the characters, when you go over to Shenmue, like, let me give you an example. Let's talk Lao Chan and Landi. Lao Chan uses the fighting style Koen Ken, which is the Tiger Swallow Fist, and Koen Ken is actually a real-world legendary fighting style. There are ancient manuscripts that say, okay, here's the most feared kung fu style out there, Koen Ken. But the style has actually been lost, but it did exist at one time, although it may have become mythic and overblown over the centuries. But if somebody was a master of Koen Ken, everybody was scared of that guy in ancient China, right? And
sure.
And the whole idea is that Lao Chan, who is a cook, by the way, miraculously somehow this master of Koen Ken, which is a long dead martial arts style, just shows up. That shouldn't happen. It's been gone for hundreds, maybe like 1,000 years, right? And so when you go into Shenmue and Ryo's talking to Ajiichi, the owner of the Ajiichi restaurant, and he's like, hey Ryo, the three blades. Yeah. There's a baker and the barber and the cook, and we were imperial bodyguards for the emperor and stuff like that. Well, you find out later on too that Ryo finds a scroll in his dojo, and he takes it to Guizan, and Guizan says, oh, hey, look, there's a tiger on here. It says, great tiger, rush up Moon Mountain, and he's like, this is secret poetry. It's a martial arts move written in poetry. And so martial arts masters would hide their martial arts styles through poetry. And the reason they did that was because it actually turns out Koen Ken, the reason it disappeared was because an emperor feared it so much that he made its practice outlawed. And anybody who practiced or mastered it or disseminated was executed, taken out. That's how it disappeared. So how did Lao Chan figure out Koen Ken? Well, one of his hobbies in Virtua Fighter is Chinese poetry. So it turns out, as a cook, he's one of the three blades. This is kind of my theory here, but as a cook, it makes him one of the three blades, which would give him access to these martial arts that guarded the emperor. And as the members of the three blades would have hunted down practitioners of Koen Ken, gotten these martial arts scrolls, Lao finds them. It really makes you realize, wow, Landi showing up and killing Iwao with a mysterious martial arts style, which is Koen Ken, really deepens the world of Shenmue, and you would never get that if you didn't know about Lao Chan. And when you put them together, it really fleshes out the universe a little bit more. So, sorry for rambling like that, but...
No, I gotta say that was fascinating.
Yes, it really is. It really is. So, I mean, if you want to know more about that kind of stuff, guys, you can check out over on the Virtua Bros channel. I've got Lao Chan Virtua Fighter lore. I go into it over there. But I really, guys, if you're a fan of Virtua Fighter, please get into Shenmue. And if you're a fan of Shenmue, please get into Virtua Fighter, because they go together so well. And they really are a fascinating combination.
it does make sense. Like I said, like the Virtua Fighter RPG became Shenmue. The foundation is there, and a lot of people I've heard that before. A lot of people say like a lot of the secrets of what's supposed to happen in Shenmue might kind of be revealed when you go back and play old Virtua Fighter games and study them, because like you said, there's all these connections, and it's not the first time I've heard that, though. That was a very specific storyline. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And actually, Switch from PhantomRiverstone.com, who you may be familiar with.
Oh, I've met him. He's a good dude.
Yeah, he's really cool. I've talked to him online a little bit. He actually discovered some Koen Ken storyline in the Shenmue 2 code. And so it talks about how Lan Di was mad at, who's the guy that Ryo finds in Shenmue 2 who's like hiding in a library or something, and you got to like put the keys in the Buddha statue.
Yuan Dazu.
Yeah, Yuan Dazu. Something about Yuan Dazu having access to Koen Ken manuscripts and trying to keep them away from Lan Di. Like, that's in there. So this is stuff that might be more fleshed out in Shenmue 3, and so it's super interesting. And you would never get that if you don't delve into the Virtua Fighter lore and the history. So I just highly recommend it, and I hope you get a chance to try it out. Virtua Fighter 2 and Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown are on the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, digitally, and on the Xbox One X, they are still backwards compatible. So that's where I play it.
I was actually going to ask, which one would you suggest I dive into?
Well, here's the deal, man. And look, just to show you how big of a Virtua Fighter fan I am here, you have a Sega Saturn, do you not?
Of course.
So check this out. Can you see this, Adam? I got Virtua Fighter 1 on Skype. Oh, you're probably looking at your audio, aren't you?
No, I'm looking at Skype, but there's nothing. I'm not seeing a video from you.
Oh, snap. Well, that's silly. Did I turn it off?
Oh, no, that's right. I'm using my phone.
So you just won't be able to see it?
All right. Wait, now I see you.
Oh, you do?
Hi.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Yeah.
So here we go. Virtua Fighter 1 for the Sega Saturn. Not a good frame rate.
The original version.
But
yeah, well, that's why it was remixed.
Remix right here.
Yep.
Pretty fun. Still not running at 60. If you have a Sega Saturn, you can't go wrong. It's a very, very good port. Virtua Fighter 2 here. Excellent port. Runs at 60 frames per second. Now, if you play it on the Xbox One X or 360 or the PS3, it's still really good. The graphics are better, there's better textures, and there's some stages that have more polygons and more effects that this version had to strip out. However, in the end credits, it'll show a little montage of your guy beating up all these fighters, and they'll fall down on the ground. And then it'll go to the next. So just every person you beat in the arcade mode will fall down. Well, in the port to the 360 and PS3, when they fall down on the ground, they sit there for like half a second, and then all their textures pop off, and they look like a hairy gorilla. It's really fun. It's really funny, but it takes you out of it. So in some ways, I still prefer this. So Virtua Fighter 2, can't go wrong with it. I'm going to come to your favorite console, Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle.
Ah, of course.
You
skipped over the Genesis one. How could you do that?
We shall not speak its name. Although the 32X is really great. 32X is a super good version of that. I need to get that.
Joking.
So you're poking holes in how big of a Virtua Fighter fan I am because I don't have the Genesis or the 32X ones. Shoot, exposed. This one's really cool because people didn't like it as much at first because it's got like a fourth button. Instead of it's punch, kick, guard, and then evade, and the evade lets you sidestep into 3D. People didn't like how they messed with that. They were resistant to the change, but it's got really cool environmental physics and uneven backgrounds, and it has, unlike most Virtua Fighter games, it actually has like an ending cinematic when you beat the game. It's got a history mode where you can watch cutscenes on the history of Virtua Fighter. So this is a very underrated. It's not the most faithful port, but it's pretty decent. And it's a pretty underrated game. So since you have a Dreamcast, this is not a bad place for you to go. So Virtua Fighter 2 for Saturn, Virtua Fighter 3 for Dreamcast is good. Now, possibly the best, arguably the best Virtua Fighter. Virtua Fighter 4 Final Tuned for the arcades, probably the absolute best Virtua Fighter game ever made. But as you know, Virtua Fighter 4 came out for the PlayStation 2. This isn't bad, but go ahead and pick up Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution. The NTSC version is really cool because it lets you play the game with Virtua Fighter 1 graphic skins.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it's really cool. So you get characters who were not in Virtua Fighter 1 that are rendered in Virtua Fighter 1 graphics, like Go here and Brad Burns. And so this is a really good one to go with. Now, if you want to know modern consoles, Virtua Fighter 5 does exist physically. Virtua Fighter 5 Online. This is arcade version B. Arcade version A was on the PlayStation 3, so this is a little bit more updated, I guess you could say. But people argue about what's better, A or B. But then you have Final Showdown on the 360 and PS3, and I would say go with Final Showdown over VF5 Online because it has additional characters. It has 2 additional characters over this game. So it depends on what you want to play on, Adam. If you want to play on modern consoles like your Xbox One X, I would just go ahead and pick up both Virtua Fighter 2 on there. It's a good port, and Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown.
Well, I have no problem using my Saturn. That's nothing.
Hey, go to your Saturn and use your PS2, use your Dreamcast. Those are all great versions there. So a few tips there for you to get into some Virtua Fighter.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very